Okay, I've seen quite a few different methods employed for repairing damaged laser centerboards and rudders over the years. These are foils which are made out of high density polyurethane, and I'm going to talk about the method that I've found to be the most successful in terms of repairing these. So this is fairly typical damage to the trailing edge of the centerboard and also to the tip of the trailing edge. So the first thing to do is to tidy up and get a nice flat surface. In this case I'm going to use a round file and just clean up the edge. Similarly for the trailing edge, use a flat file to generate a nice flat edge. The next stage of the repair is to put some pins, some support pins, into the damaged area, and for this I use a combination of 20mm and 16mm veneer pins. Anything bigger than that, and I find that it starts to split, but I find that this size has been quite successful. This particular one is quite a big area of damage. I'm using 20mm veneer pins. So I just distribute these evenly around the damaged area. The main thing is that the pins sit below the trailing edge of the centerboard. Okay, the next thing is to cut out some pieces of fiberglass mat. For these repairs, I generally use 450, which is the weight of the mat. I would normally cut 2 or 3 pieces for either side, right. And if you notice, I'm leaving about 5 to 10mm hanging over the trailing edge. Yeah. And that's to enable me to get a really good sharp trailing edge. Brilliant. I'm just using the first piece as a pattern now. Similarly to here. Okay, so now we've got 4 pieces of fiberglass mat, and we'll put 2 either side of the pins, and again at the tip we've got 4 pieces of mat with quite a bit of excess on the edges so that we can get a good edge. Next thing we do is to clean the surface with acetone, and what that does is it takes any dirt away, but just as importantly it takes any moisture away from the surface. And once we've done that, we tape off the damaged area. Using a wide masking tape, and the next thing, just to support the repair, is to put some corrugated stiff cardboard on the back, and then similarly here on the tip. and then put the first piece of fiberglass mat up against the tape inside the repair, and again with the tip. And then we're ready now to mix some fiberglass resin or polyester resin. We mix that using 2% hardener, and start to wet out the mat with the polyester resin. It's quite important to really wet out the fiberglass mat. And then once the mat is fully wetted out, then the next thing we do first of all is to again tape off the repair. Again, piece of cardboard for support. Match the cardboard up. Then clamp off the repair. Keep the centerboard vertical and give that an hour or two to go off. Once the polyester resin has gone hard, then we take off the clamps and the cardboard and the tape. Right, next, make a nice straight line, just slightly behind the trailing edge. And use a hacksaw blade taped at the end to protect your hands. It enables you to get a very straight edge right in down the trailing edge. Ideally, just cut on the outside of the line. We can always take this down when we sand it. To prepare this for the next stage, I'm using 100 grit sandpaper on an orbital sander. The important thing is to note that there's the transition between the repair and the board here is quite important. And there's a bit of resin actually on the board which we want to remove. So I'm just using a blade to speed up the process there. Just to get the final finish, just a bit of handheld sandpaper. Okay. Clean the surface with acetone. Okay, for the filler, I use a professional car body filler. This gives a very hard finish, but it's easy to sand. I don't recommend I don't recommend, for example, gel coat, because it becomes a lot harder when it goes off than the surrounding area. So it's very hard to sand it down and get a fair surface. It's quite important to totally mix the hardener with the filler, otherwise you get soft spots forming. Just apply the filler smoothly over the repair, and ideally you want it to be proud of the repair by a couple of mil. So just fill in all the other bits and pieces, that all the little tiny dings that need filling. Okay, so the next thing is to take off the tape, and then we sand this down to what we hope is going to be the final finish. I'm going to start off with quite a rough sandpaper 60 grit. So now that we've got the final sanded finish, everything is looking pretty fair. We need to finish the surface, and one way, if you send the repaired foil, we have a spray oven in which we can apply a really hard polyurethane finish. Or if you're on location, you know, at an event, then I use this plastic coat, and there's a primer, super, and a satin super. So the first thing is to clean the surface with acetone. So we give it a final wipe off just to remove any dust from the sanding. And then to apply this plastic coat, I find it helps to put lots of very thin coats on rather than try and apply one heavy coat. So starting with the primer, you can see here that I've just masked off the rope handle and also the stopper. That could be removed, but I've just taped it off in this case. Okay, so now that I've got 2 or 3 thin coats of primer, I'm going to put the satin super, the finishing coat now.